1095. Pope Urban II stands before a crowd. His mission? Reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim rule. For centuries, it was under Muslim control. He was a master politician and speaker. He brought up every Christian grievance in the East, like pilgrims facing persecution, plus forgiveness of sins for anyone who joined the fight. Barons, counts, dukes, they loved it. Knights, since birth, war was their whole life. They knew nothing else, really. This was all they knew. And now, a war for paradise. For deeply religious folks in the 11th century, that's everything. The younger sons of lords were even more hyped. They often got nothing from inheritance. Just small land plots, or they'd join the clergy or fight as mercenaries. This campaign? A chance for new land. A chance to build their own kingdoms, their own dynasties. Soon, armies were forming across Europe. In southern Italy, newly conquered by Normans, the smallest army, but the toughest, led by Prince Bohemond I of Taranto. His stepmother and brother took his inheritance, so he sought his fortune elsewhere. The biggest army came from the Occidents, led by Count Raymond I V. The Knights of Lorraine formed the Third Army. In northern France, the Fourth Army lacked a clear leader. It was a mix of forces like Hugh of Vermandois and Duke Robert II of Normandy, who had to give up his duchy, plus Stephen II and Robert II. Ordinary people wanted in too. Some dreamed of escaping poverty forever. Others believed the Pope's promise of absolution, an entry into paradise. Some saw Palestine as the real promised land. This army was more like a mob. Led by Peter the Hermit and Walter the Penniless, Arabs took Palestine way back in the 7th century. For a long time, local Christians weren't bothered much, and Europeans could still visit. Arabs were outnumbered by local Christians, so they couldn't harm them or force conversions. The only rule? A tax for non-Muslims, a tax called jizya. Things changed in the 10th century. The Arab state split into two caliphates, the Fatimid Caliphate, Shia Muslims, and the Abbasid Caliphate, still Sunni. Palestine sat right on their border. It switched hands often. Then, in the 11th century, Seljuk Turks arrived. They converted to Islam and built their own empire. It quickly broke into many smaller states, and they were constantly fighting. The region was crawling with soldiers, from local rulers and raiding bands, often from defeated armies. It got dangerous for everyone. Attacks on pilgrims increased. Many were captured and enslaved. A notable incident involved Bishop Gunther. He led 7,000 pilgrims to Jerusalem. Near Caesarea, they were attacked. Some died, others were taken prisoner. It's unclear who attacked them. Muslims were trying to fix their own problems, but it just led to more division. Caliph al-Hakim blamed non-believers and started persecuting them. In 1009, he destroyed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Amidst this chaos, Muslims met the Crusaders. Alexios I Komnenos was the first emperor of his dynasty. His power came from military wins. He beat Bohemond of Taranto. Later, Alexios beat the Pechenegs. Then he fought the Seljuks. Byzantines often used alliances and hired help. To fight Normans, Alexios hired Venetians. He even used defeated enemy remnants. In 1090, he asked the Pope for an alliance. He wanted European knights against the Turks. Jerusalem wasn't mentioned. But Urban II knew Europe better. The Turks were far away. But Palestine? Europeans knew it from the Bible. It was the spiritual center of the world. The first to arrive at Constantinople? The common folk. Chroniclers say 100,000. Modern estimates? 25,000 to 30,000. This was the People's Crusade. On their way, they attacked Jewish communities in the Rhine cities and looted towns in Hungary. Local rulers drove them out. In Constantinople, they didn't last long. The emperor wanted to wait for the knights, but Peter the Hermit rushed ahead. Some say the Byzantines didn't want them inside, due to their looting. The Byzantines hesitated to let them in. When poor folks stole a lead roof from a city church, Alexios had them shipped fast across the Bosporus. In Asia Minor, the crowd ended up in Sivietot, a Byzantine coastal fort. Meanwhile, the Rum Sultan Kilij Arslan watched the Europeans, but didn't fight yet, waiting for a better time. During this, the poor mob started fighting amongst themselves. Kilij Arslan, after beating the German groups that split off, slyly tricked the rest into an ambush in a valley near the fort. Then, he wiped out almost all of their men. Peter the Hermit survived just because he was in Constantinople then, talking with the emperor. All 4 Crusader armies showed up in Constantinople during 1097, except for Hugh of Vermandois losing his army and stuff in a storm, and the papal representative Audemars getting robbed by the Pechenegs. The Crusaders mostly got to Byzantium okay. Their combined army in Constantinople had over 30,000 soldiers. The Byzantines helped with troops led by Tatius, Emperor Alexios, stepbrother, and arranged transport and supplies. In exchange, the Crusaders had to swear loyalty to Byzantium and promise to give any land taken from Muslims back to the Byzantine Empire. After that, the combined forces started a month-long siege of Nicaea. During this time, the Crusaders beat back the Turks trying to help the city. Meanwhile, the Byzantines hauled their ships overland to Lake Ascania. Alexios secretly talked with the Turkish soldiers inside, who finally surrendered to the Byzantines. The Crusaders weren't allowed in the city. It was normal back then to loot cities for supplies and campaign costs. The Crusaders were mad, and this led to early clashes between them and the Byzantines. From Nicaea, the Crusaders marched east in 2 groups. The Normans, led by Bohemond of Taranto, went first. Behind them came the French, led by Raymond of Toulouse. After a 3-day march, Bohemond reached Dorylaeum and camped for the night. By morning, Sultan Kilij Arslan's forces had surrounded him. The Turks, using horse archer tactics, almost beat the Crusaders, but Raymond and his army suddenly showed up and saved them. The combined armies attacked the Turks from both sides, making Kilij Arslan run away and leave his army. This win cleared the path for the Crusaders and also expanded Byzantine lands. Soon, Tancred of Taranto, Bohemond's nephew, and Baldwin of Bouillon, with their own armies, broke from the main Crusader group and headed for Cilicia, an area the Seljuks were just starting to take. This region was mostly home to Armenian Christians, whose kingdom had already broken into many small areas. The knights easily beat the small Turkish groups there and then started fighting each other. In the winter of 1097, when Baldwin captured Turbzul, he got messengers from the Armenian prince of Edessa, Thoros. They offered Baldwin a chance to serve the prince, who was fighting the emir of Samsat, Balduk I. On the way to Edessa, Baldwin beat Balduk I's forces, so when he arrived, the city welcomed Baldwin like a hero, and Thoros even adopted him. It's worth mentioning that Thoros had a bad reputation. He started as a Byzantine general, but betrayed them by joining the Turks. Then he betrayed them too, declaring himself the independent ruler of Edessa. Thoros was Armenian, but practiced orthodoxy, making him a religious heretic to many. Also, because he lost so often, his people thought he was a weak leader, so it's no surprise that after Baldwin's successful fight against Samsat, the townspeople revolted against Thoros, killed him, and made Baldwin the ruler of Edessa. Later, because Baldwin had a bad reputation in Europe, a story grew that he actually pushed the townspeople to rebel against their prince. Still, that's how the county of Edessa became the first Crusader state in the Middle East. In October 1097, the Crusader army began the Siege of Antioch. The city's defense was led by the Atabeg Iagisian. He tried to hold the forts around the city and made several attacks outside the walls. However, his whole defense plan was to just hold out until help arrived. The siege was tough for the Crusaders too. Antioch was a big city with long walls. and there weren't enough soldiers to surround it completely. During winter, the Crusaders ran out of food, and hunger started to spread in the camp. Even though they took one of the city gates, they couldn't keep it, and the city stayed unconquered. In February 1098, Crusader forces were threatened from behind by the army of the Emir of Aleppo, aiming to help the city. Bohemond of Taranto faced them. He positioned his troops on a hill near Antioch's lake, and, with a strong cavalry charge, totally defeated the Turks. The siege went on. The Crusader leaders couldn't agree on a plan. During one of these arguments, Bohemond hit a horse near his tent, and after this event, all the other Crusaders agreed he should take charge. Because of the bad conditions in the Crusader camp, people started leaving in large numbers. Even Peter the Hermit was among the deserters, but he was caught and forced back into the army. At the same time, the Byzantine general Titius also left, maybe discouraged by the chance of winning or scared of the Crusaders, who had threatened to kill him. In March, English troops under Edgar Atheling arrived by sea in Palestine, bringing supplies and materials for siege weapons. In June, after a 9-month siege, the Crusaders finally took the city. A local, an Armenian named Firuz, opened the gates for them, letting the Crusaders take most of the city. Yagi Sion was killed trying to escape. The only part of the city still held by the Turks was the citadel, located on the mountainous side. While the Crusaders were besieging Antioch, the Mosul Atabeg Kerboga was building a coalition against them. He got the emirs of Damascus, Aleppo, Homs, and many other Seljuk leaders. Gathering an army of 40,000 troops, Kerboga headed for Antioch. On the way, he tried to take Edessa, but was defeated and gave up the siege after a month. By the time Kerboga got to Antioch, the Crusaders had already captured most of the city. Due to rumors about a large Muslim army coming, Count Etienne de Blois fled the camp. On his way, he met Byzantine Emperor Alexios I and convinced him the Crusaders had lost. So, Alexios I turned his troops back and retreated. Meanwhile, the Crusaders found themselves about to lose again. They were under siege from inside Antioch, fighting off attacks from outside the city and the Turks trying to break out from the citadel. The city gave them almost no food, leading to a serious shortage among the troops. At this crucial time, a soldier named Pierre Barthélemy claimed to have found a holy relic, the lance of Longinus, the lance that had pierced Jesus Christ's side. With new spirit, the Crusaders started to get ready for battle. At the same time, trouble began to spread among Kerboga's troops. Some of the emirs left him, while others refused to fight. The soldiers, remembering past grudges, started fighting each other. This chaos reached such a point that when the Crusaders came out of Antioch's walls to fight them, the Turks were caught by surprise and unprepared. The Crusader vanguard was led by Hugh of Vermandois, who quickly defeated the enemy forces attacking the walls. Following this, the troops of Count Godfrey of Bouillon joined the main battle. At the same time, the Occitanians attacked the Turkish sides, while the Normans fought off attacks from the rear. The reserve forces, commanded by Bohemond of Taranto, delivered the finishing blows, making the Turks flee the battlefield. The remaining Turkish troops in the citadel, under siege by Raymond of Toulouse's forces, surrendered. Right after Antioch was taken, the Crusaders started having issues with the Byzantines. They remembered Titisio's retreat, how the emperor had turned back his own army, and that they didn't get enough supplies. Hugh of Vermandois, the most pro-Byzantine of the Crusade leaders, was sent to talk with Alexios. But after barely starting the talks, he just ran back home. The Crusaders wouldn't give the captured city to the Byzantines. Instead, Bohemond of Taranto declared himself Prince of Antioch as Bohemond I, creating a second Crusader state in the Holy Land. For the next 6 months, the Crusaders took over small towns south of Antioch. Marit al-Numan held out the longest, resisting for 2 whole months. The siege of Marit is linked to stories of cannibalism among the Crusaders. Eventually, after Marit fell, the knights split up. Bohemond stayed in Antioch, while the rest, led by Raymond of Toulouse, went on to lay siege to Arca. The siege dragged on, looking like it would repeat the long situation they had in Antioch. So Godfrey of Bouillon convinced the troops to head for Jerusalem. After taking Ramla, the Crusaders marched towards Jerusalem, which the Fatimids had captured from the Turks a year before. The Fatimids had actually offered peace to the Crusaders earlier, but the Crusaders insisted on the surrender of Jerusalem. The Siege of Jerusalem, starting in June 1098, lasted more than a year. It wasn't until the Genoese arrived in Palestine bringing siege equipment for the Crusaders that they got ready for an attack. The final assault on Jerusalem began with a very decisive push. The Crusaders broke through the city walls and captured it from both sides, resulting in a really brutal massacre. The violence was totally indiscriminate. Not only Muslims, but also local Jews were killed after the city was taken. After 3 days of looting, the Crusaders finally started figuring out what to do with Jerusalem. Most of them wanted to set up a kingdom there. The crown was offered to Raymond of Toulouse, but he turned it down. Then, it was offered to Count Godfrey of Bouillon. He didn't refuse the power, but he said he didn't want to wear a gold crown where Jesus Christ wore a crown of thorns, so he took the title Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. Around this time in Egypt, the vizier Al-Afdal Shahanshah gathered 20,000 soldiers and marched to take Jerusalem back. Even with its numbers, the army wasn't ready for combat. It was made up of mercenaries who didn't want to fight or were even fighting among themselves, moving in separate groups, even as they marched. In this state, unprepared for battle, the Crusaders ran into them at Ascalon. With a surprise attack, they easily defeated the Muslims. Because of this, the Crusaders secured their position in Palestine, creating their main state, the Kingdom of Jerusalem. In name, its king was considered the leader, and all other Crusader states were his subjects. These states would last for almost 100 years, always at war. The First Crusade succeeded in its goal of recapturing Jerusalem, and fueled by this success, Europe would be swept up in crusading passion for the next 2 centuries. After that, the Crusaders would intensely fight not only against Muslims and pagans, but also against Orthodox Greeks and people in southern France, all in an effort to keep their power.